to set the prices that every doctor, dentist, podiatrist, nurse, physician's assistant can charge, whether we accept insurance or not. That's an unprecedented amount of power to grant to 5 people that we never elected to do anything, and that the legislature has little or no oversight of. We're moving down this pathway towards single-payer health care, like cattle in a chute. And I'm not sure if it's the light at the end of that tunnel, that chute, if that's a light, or if that's simply the executioner's flashlight. I'm not sure. Because we ask fundamental questions like, how much is it going to cost? Who's going to pay for it? How are we going to pay for it? What's going to be covered? Can I keep my own insurance? What's going to happen to doctors and providers? And nobody can answer any of those questions with a statement other than, trust me. Now, the governor said very loudly as this bill was being debated last year, look, don't worry. If it doesn't save money, we won't do it. Do you remember that? Sort of like read my lips. But now, the statement is very different, because if you listen to the Commissioner of Financial Regulation, if you listen to the head of the Green Mountain Care Board, the dialogue has now changed. What they say is it will reduce the cost curve. It will reduce the rate of growth in spending. Remember that definition I used a little bit earlier of cut? That's changed. The language has changed. We're not where they don't anticipate they're going to save any money. And Wendy Wilton's projections, nobody has yet challenged as being inaccurate. And how are we going to pay for it? Small businesses are worried, and rightly so, because if you look at even Dr. Schall's projections, which are long since past what he suggested that we do, payroll taxes of 14%, partially paid by employees and partially paid by employers, is a huge burden on any small business, larger than the amount, for example, of health care that many are paying now, and for those who can't afford health care, sufficient to put them out of business. And there are no answers. Now, we have an amendment pending, which I know will not go anywhere, bill pending will go nowhere, of accelerating the date to tell us how they're going to pay for it to September 2012 before the election. They say they can't do that. They can only do that and tell us what it's going to, how we're going to pay for it in January 2013, 2 months after the election. Now, I realize a lot of work is going to be done over the Christmas holiday and so on and so forth, and so that's why they need all that extra time. So healthcare is a big problem, and that's something that we need to deal with. And from my perspective, what we need to do is we need to do things that we can measure. We need to take the tremendous resources that are focused on building a single-payer system and focus it on doing the things that will control healthcare cost. We can focus on things like wellness. We can begin to tackle the malpractice problem by coming up with different solutions. We can look at catastrophic health coverages, a layer of coverage, perhaps even publicly supported, to prevent people from going bankrupt because of medical conditions. We can look at how we can attract younger people who are not buying health care because of the cost into the system, possibly by making a slight modification in the way we apply community rating rules to encourage people to get into the system in the first place. We can go on and on and on of things that we can do, things that we can measure that don't require us to take over 1/6 of the economy, and to create systems of incredible complexity to manage. If you take a look at the IT plan for just the exchanges alone, it would boggle your mind, and it raises questions as to whether it's going to be doable at all by the people that we have doing it. Building complex IT systems is not a core competency of state government. You know, if you take a look at things like the motor vehicle system, in which we spent $18 million 5, 6, 7 years ago, it's not working yet. The vision system, the state accounting system that was put in, was a disaster. It was years behind schedule. And the fear that many people, particularly small businesses, have is the same thing's going to happen with the healthcare exchanges. The exchanges, I think, were a great idea, but they went too far. A great idea to be able to put information out in an Expedia-like fashion so that people can look at healthcare plans a variety of healthcare plans that are competitive with one another, and then make a choice as to the plan that's best for you and for your family. And now we've perverted that to use that as a pathway to limit choice and to limit competition. People say healthcare is different. Healthcare doesn't operate along the same rules that the rest of the economy. You know, every time I go into a Costco or a Best Buy, I look at the large screen TVs. Every week the price is lower. With healthcare, it seems the price is higher. In fact, it seems with healthcare, you don't know what the price is until you got the bill, because nobody can tell you. But is healthcare different? Well, the one difference is because the government is helping you. And every time it helps you, the price seems to go up. And government has always been great about promising things and then failing to pay for them. You look at Medicare, you look at Medicaid. Medicaid is the classic example. And the fear with a single payer system is that once the government is the payer, there's nobody left to shift the cost to. And then we get into the situations such as we see in Canada, in which the way to control cost is to ration. And they don't call it rationing. They call it things like global budgets. And interestingly enough, global budgets are one of the things that are in the Shumlin healthcare budget and healthcare bill. So healthcare is a big item. Jobs in the economy are another big item. Our unemployment is lower than lots of places in the country. But how much lower is it? Because A, some people have stopped looking for work. They're not counted as unemployed anymore. Some people have left to go to greener pastures. They're certainly not counted in our unemployment numbers. And we still have at the same time businesses who say, I can't find people to fill the jobs that I have because they don't have the skills that I need. We need to focus more on marrying skills with jobs. And obviously we need to grow jobs. How do you grow jobs? Well, you don't do it with government. Government doesn't create jobs. That's one of the fundamental things that I think folks in the administration forget. Entrepreneurs create jobs. What we need to do is we need to make sure that we create an environment that's conducive to job growth. We need to create that fertile soil. We need to do things opposite of what my father experienced, and that is look at taxes and regulation as inhibitors to job growth, as things that hurt business opportunity. We need to do what Ireland did and change the attitude in many cases in state government to one of welcoming employers in trying to meet needs that don't fit with the programs that we have, at exercising flexibility, at giving some rope, if you will, to our employees in state government, both to create jobs and to do lots of other things. You know, one of the reasons we were really successful post-Irene is not just what government did, but clearly, obviously, the volunteer efforts of thousands of Vermonters who simply rolled up their sleeves and did things. Something that you wouldn't see in lots of other parts of the country. But I go back to what our state employees did. Because relieved of a lot of the bureaucratic strictures, a lot of the red tape, they were empowered and were actually able to go do things without having to go through 7 layers of bureaucracy, pages and pages of rules and forms and procedures and strictures and supervisory reviews. They were able to act. And the best companies in America are companies in which people are empowered. And maybe we should loosen the reins a bit and try to empower our state employees under guidelines, and we might be surprised that they can do great things too if they're allowed to do it. I learned that in the Army. I think we can learn that in government. We need to reform our education system. We're spending too much money. If you look at education, in the last 10 years, our cost per pupil in education has gone up 149.9%, whereas the number of kids in school has gone down 18.3%. And I've used this example before of taking, just for fun, the Excel spreadsheet, projecting the rate of growth upward in spending and the rate of decline in students. Because what I was trying to find out is how much will it cost to educate a child in Vermont schools when there are no kids in school at all. I won't go any further with that calculation. But clearly, when you have something that's unsustainable, you've got to change it. Now, the governor said in his budget speech, he said, you know, we should collapse the number of supervisory unions down from its current 62 down to somewhere around 16. And he got a lot of applause. He said that will save us $9 million. Well, my calculation on the back of the envelope said the only way you will only save $9 million is if you take all of the people in those 62 buildings and you put them in 16 buildings. Because if you make a conscious reduction, you ought to save $35 to $40 million. But he was only going to save 9. But interestingly enough, after the speech, you didn't hear a peep about it. And Kevin, I know you had education. Have they come to you with a plan to do any of that?
No, but we did pass a bill out that requires them to come to with a plan next year.
Yeah. But, you know, the one risk that you have, and I think that's a very positive step of requiring them to come back with something. One of the things I've always found is that somewhere in Montpelier, I am convinced, there is a warehouse full of studies on education. Bill Doyle, who's been in the Senate since 1969, I think did a plan to reduce the number of supervisory unions in the mid-60s. And you see how far it's gotten. There's great pressure from the education lobby to do nothing. And it's great that, you know, Kevin, I applaud you for getting that plan done and getting that request done this year. And hopefully we can make some progress on it as we go forward. But somewhere we've also got to deal with the number of adults in classrooms, because, you know, it's common sense. It's if you have a class, and I've been into a number of classes in which you have 12 or 13 kids, and you got 5 adults in the classroom. And the biggest growth has been in teaching assistants, paraprofessionals, and so on. And the thing that I noticed in particular is that education spending doesn't seem to equate with the quality of education. Time and time again, I remember I was served on education 2 years ago. And we took a look at the 15 highest spending districts in the state and the 15 lowest spending districts in the state, and then compared test scores. And there was no statistically significant difference between the two. And in the investigative business, that would be referred to as a clue. Our task, of course, is this. How do we give our kids a great education at a price the taxpayers can afford? And to do that, we've got to break through the education lobby. And we've got to make some bold changes. Perhaps do it at least on a pilot basis, and perhaps measure what we do. But we've got to move forward. We can't continue on the path that we're on because it's fiscally unsustainable. And to the property taxpayer knows it. And we can't continue to play the games Montpelier does of shifting money so that we reduce the amount of contribution to the ed fund so it looks like the local school boards are the ones who are creating the problem, when it's Montpelier that simply won't face the issue and tackle it head on, and it has to. Energy. The governor has proposed an ambitious plan to move to a renewable portfolio standard within, well, 75% renewable energy within 20 years and 90% by 2050. Interesting thing happened in the State House, in the Senate, on Senate Natural Resources and Energy, on which I sit on Friday. We voted down the governor's bill. Whether that'll last remains to be seen, because there's a lot more maneuvering that could go on before the session. We were able to do it on a 3-2 vote in the committee because one of the people who would be expected to vote for the bill got mad at a provision that was put in and voted against the administration's bill, and I'm sure there's going to be some heavy arm twisting going on in the next week or so. But this plan, if it goes in, the net effect of it will be to raise electricity rates, depending upon whose number you use, of $300 to $400 million to the ratepayers over the next 20 years. It